Well, it was another violent weekend in Chicago recently, over the Easter weekend. 37 shootings, 9 people died as a result of those shootings. And of course, certainly that's not limited to Chicago. Violence is everywhere throughout the United States of America, the Western world, and really even in the entire world. There is just violence breaking out everywhere. Now, when we look at the Bible prophetically concerning the signs of the last days, one of the 9 specific prophetic signs that Jesus Christ gave concerning the last days would be the increase of violence and evil throughout the world. The Apostle Timothy in 2 Timothy 3 echoed that sentiment. He said that there would be terrible times in the last days. And we see even in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel, where it's mentioned that there would be an increase in wickedness in the world in the last days. Now, as you know, everything has a cause and effect relationship. Things just don't happen for no reason. Now, why are we seeing the increase in violence throughout the world? Well, you go back to about the middle of the 19th century, and we see the rejection of Judeo-Christian Moors for humanistic Moors. Now, that comes on the heels of Charles Darwin's introduction of his Origin of the Species in 1859, where he attempted to write out the existence of God and try to explain creation through a purely naturalistic view. And unfortunately, the world embraced that. Atheists, who at that time had to reject God specifically on rebellion, because they couldn't prove that he didn't exist, well, now they had a scientific reason, at least they thought, a scientific excuse, a reason to reject God. Well, they went to work and they began proselytizing that worldview in the schools, the popular culture, academics, media. And the result is that millions of young minds were poisoned, believing that they were nothing more than the end product of random evolutionary forces. Well, when that worldview prevails, then people obviously don't believe they're accountable for their moral actions, their thoughts, their words. In other words, anything goes, the ends justify the means. And that's what we're seeing today in the world. And of course, here in Chicago, Police Superintendent Gary McCarthy tried to blame the violence on guns, as does, of course, the Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Because they don't want to admit the obvious, that people have rebelled against God. They no longer respect his laws or his commandments. They've thrown off restraint. And the church, of course, plays a big role in this too, because the Christian church in America and the Western world began to abandon the Bible and the gospel about the middle of the 19th century to embrace humanistic mores and ideologies such as humanistic psychology and evolution, and began to see all religions, all world religions, as valid and equal pathways to God. Of course, they're not, and we know that, but we don't have time to talk about that now. But needless to say, the increase of wickedness and violence, there's a cause and effect relationship. The cause is the rejection of the world, of Judeo-Christian Moors, laws and commandments set down by God thousands of years ago and given to Moses. And the effect is, of course, rebellion, violence, evil, murder, widespread depravity. The things that the world celebrates today that were condemned by earlier generations that are now celebrated and promoted openly throughout the world. Now, as Christians, our job is this: to make the gospel relevant again to the world, to contend for the faith as the Apostle Jude exhorted us to do 2,000 years ago. Make the faith relevant to the world. Make people understand that God is real, that evolution is a fraud. It can't be proven. It's a hoax. And you have to do that scientifically and through the witness of the Bible and the inspiration of the Bible, the power of God through the Holy Spirit that indwells us as believers. If you don't do that, we're going to see more and more of the carnage and violence and evil that's going on in the world today. It's only going to get worse. So when we see these kinds of weekends that happen here in Chicago, just keep in mind where it all goes back to. Thank you again, and God bless.